Camera's on. Did a clap indication. Microphone's on. You guys ready to go?
All right.
All right.
You feeling good?
All right.
All right.
I'm
Action.
good.
All right. Welcome to the podcast and the video podcast. My name is Mike Mauritius. I am an internet marketing consultant, and I'm here with Trina Anderson. She is a document imaging consultant. Trina, can you tell me what the heck is a document image consultant?
Well, that's a great question, actually. A lot of people just call us your copier rep, but in all actuality, we're experts on how to create images that need to be stored or archived, also analyze your guys' workflow, lease documents, service agreements, supplies, contracts, that type of thing.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions from our frequently asked questions from the audience.
Sure.
People want to know, what is the difference between the different agreement types? Can you explain that? I know some people get one agreement, some people get a different one. So how many agreement types are there, and then what do they mean?
You know, there are about as many lease agreement types as there are people in their creative ways of thinking of things. But there are some very, very common ones, and there's three most common, and then there's some lesser known. So the first that most people are familiar with is called a fair market value lease.
Okay.
This is a lease in which somebody leases their pieces of equipment, and then at the end of the lease, they have an option to return the piece of equipment or buy it out at a fair market value rate. That can be disclosed at any point in time or figured out at the beginning of the lease or at the end of the lease.
Oh, that's the fair market value?
That's a fair market value. Then the next one is called a cost inclusive lease or a CPC lease, cost per copy lease. This was initially done when production companies, print houses, that type of thing, were looking to get really big pieces of equipment and have a way to charge them out to clients. Over time, it changed a little bit, but essentially what it means is that you've taken your lease agreement and your service agreement, you've combined them together, and they now show up on the same invoice with a certain allowance that you have in your lease agreement. Then the last is called a dollar out lease. The dollar out lease is a lease in which you make your payments and then you own the piece of equipment at the end of the lease for a buck.
You think that's the best one? What do you think the best one is?
No.
Is it situational, or is that?
Most of the time it's situational. A lot of times it's banked on how the actual vendor wants to construct the leases most favorable to themselves, which is kind of unfortunate. But I prefer a fair market value lease. And the reason being is that I don't want a leasing company to dictate what they feel the asset is going to be worth in 3 to 5 years. I would rather negotiate that at the end of the lease, because they don't know how hard I'm riding that machine. They don't know what the client is doing or not doing with it. They could have a cream puff that sat in the back office, and now they've got something that's really truly intrinsically worth something.
So what kind of business, or is it small business, medium? Like what size business do we need to have before I consider a lease?
Ooh, I would say that you need to be really strategic about that, actually. If you're spending or outsourcing about $200 a month or more on prints to a print shop, or if you've got a lot of desktop printers and you're spending $150 to $200 a month on ink, chances are you're probably really best served with a lease agreement.
Most people don't understand the legal part, like the terms, the conditions. Can you actually put in English the little lawyer terms that are always on the bottom of a lease? So you can put lease to English. Are you able to do that for us?
I can in some cases. What really happens with customers is that they just don't take the time to read their terms and conditions. They look at it, they see that it's written in a small font. They go, oh, well, everybody's signing this, and then they go ahead and sign the lease document. Or they look at it and they get to a point that they don't understand the legalese of it and they glaze over it. Other times they don't make notes of the real nitty gritty of it, the notification requirements that are in there. So you could go on a complete diatribe over the terms and conditions. All lease agreements have different terms and conditions because they're contingent on the finance company. Some companies, though, negotiate better lease agreements, kind of do an overlay of their own company terms and conditions, but they can always be negotiated. Don't just assume that because they're there, you don't have negotiating power. You do have negotiating power. Some things can't be changed, but other things absolutely
So what's one of those things that cannot be changed?
You're not going to be able to change whether or not the machine, you can transfer the machine. So say you've just decided, well, you know what, I'm cashing out and I sold my piece of equipment to somebody else, you can't do that, and you can't change those terms and conditions. That still belongs to a leasing company until they've consented in writing that it does not.
Or it's not like an apartment lease or a car lease where I can go on the website and transfer that over to another party. I own it, or I own that lease.
Yeah,
responsible.
again, this is where the terms and conditions get a little bit hairy. Sometimes you can do a transfer and assumption after the fact, but you can't usually change that on the lease agreement going into it.
Okay. Now, you see a lot of the business gurus telling you that you should buy a machine, own it, and run it till it's dead. Then you have a lot of other people saying you should lease it because it's a money-making entity. Which way do you prefer, to lease or to buy?
I prefer to lease. And the reason that I prefer to lease is that if I have a piece of equipment in place now that I have acquired based on my current usage, it gives me some flexibility for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out. If I buy something 3 or 4 years out, I could have a giant doorstop that I own. And in many cases, I don't have any more option to depreciate it when I do have my giant doorstop. And secondly, when somebody buys a piece of equipment, they're often buying the piece of equipment outside of their budget. So they might allot a certain amount of money and say that's all we can afford as a capital expenditure. Leasing can often allow them to purchase a piece of equipment that's truly right-sized for their needs.
Is there an opportunity to buy pre-leased equipment and do a combination of leasing something new and maybe buying someone's return?
You can. Sometimes in the copier world, you're buying a headache. So a lot of times there are great pieces of equipment that are out there if you know what to ask for as far as the mileage that's been used on them. But color machines are usually the ones that are most tricky to buy. They've been run the hardest. Somebody's photocopied the family album with
Right.
it. But generally, yeah, you can do that. I try and minimize that and make sure that I've only got used pieces of equipment in very, very strategic, non-vital parts of an organization.
Okay, then what's the average print? They said if I'm a small business, how about, like you said, I'm going to hit that 300 or more in-house, I should go get a leasing.
200.
But I know we're spending 3. So what would you recommend for like maybe a 100-person business? We got a lot of things going on. What kind of copiers are there?
Well, there's mid-size, desktop, and production, and it all is literally going to depend on what their output is and what they're trying to archive. Most of the time now, copiers are not used simply as a print device or a copy device. They're used as a scanning device.
Okay.
That is where it's primarily shifted to. So it's usually a combination. If you've got 100 people inside of there, you could need, 5, 6 different machines. Some people tell you, no, we only need 3 and they just need really, really big. But my thing is, if you're paying somebody more than minimum wage, you probably don't want them getting up and walking to the copier, especially
Okay.
your members of management and your executive crew,
Right.
because as soon as they walk by an office, they get stopped to answer questions. They're the decision makers. So those people, they need to have their own gear in their own office away from everybody else so they can stay on task.
Okay. And what's the lifespan or the lease term typically on a printer or a copier?
They go from 3 to 6 years. Most of them you'll see in the 48 month to 60, 63 month term. At 63 months, it just stretches it out a little bit for people. It's all just to get that lease amount down.
Okay, is it like a car where you can only do a certain amount of prints, like mileage, or is it more of an age thing?
That's a great question. That goes back to the cost per copy lease versus a fair market value lease. A fair market value lease allows you to separate the lease from the service, so you can adjust your service to any volume that you need. A cost per copy lease includes a certain amount of copies and generally is oversold. So it's a sales technique to be able to get somebody to say, oh, well, I've got 20,000 copies that I'm allowed in my lease agreement, and they only use 2. It really keeps them roped into a lease agreement without making changes.
That sounds good. So, well, can you define what service is? Because you'll see, and it includes the hardware and the service. What is service? I know you said it may be different per contract, but on a general talk, like what does service mean?
Service is generally service. That means technicians that are going to come out, fix the piece of equipment, the parts and the labor that are included in that, travel time. You can make allowances for after-hours service. Some of them have phone-in service, remote assistance, so they can actually log in and take a look at what you see on your computer versus what's happening at the copier and do some remote diagnostics on it. There are some companies out there that will exclude certain consumables like a drum or a fuser, but generally speaking, all service agreements will generally cover all parts, labor, transportation, that type of thing. Usually it's not staples and not paper.
Okay.
That's about
So
it.
the big serious question of the day, doesn't shaking the toner fix everything?
Yes, it absolutely does not.
Oh, it doesn't. So there you go. Mythbusters, stop shaking the toner. It will not reset the chip. So if you were not, so where did that come from, shake the toner?
Well, before, when toner was, the toner cartridges didn't have something that vibrated the toner down off the walls. Now they actually have a mechanism inside of it that internally shakes the toner for you,
Oh,
so you don't
interesting.
have
Okay.
to. Yeah, but long gone are the days of "don't worry, I got this."
Okay, so if I lease something, am I committed to buying the OEM cartridges, or may I buy off-brand from the internet?
If you have a service agreement, usually you have to buy whatever is prescribed by your vendor. So it doesn't mean that OEM is the only way to go, but oftentimes OEM is the best way to go.
Okay.
Other times the vendors have relationships with the manufacturers where they actually sell relabeled content that is OEM. It just doesn't state that. And
Okay.
because of that, you get a better deal.
That sounds good. So I'm not going to avoid a warranty if I happen to run out and need an emergency. You have to go to the local supply store and put another one in.
Generally, no, that you're not going to necessarily void it, but you're probably best to contact your vendor and just ask them to get it to you as quickly as
Okay,
possible.
so just basically stock up and always have a backup.
Yeah, some of them, like the service agreements that we offer actually have automatic toner replenishment. So the
Oh, that's
copiers tell us when you're about to run out of toner and send it to you before you get there. It'll arrive saying, "Hey."
So is
There
that
you
on a network setting? So you actually have access to the printer when it's hooked up to my network?
It's a one-way send from
Okay.
the machine, so that you don't have to worry about security. It's literally a one-way send. It'll say whether or not the toner is needing to be replenished, and will also provide a meter read, so you're not having to
Oh,
fax in a meter read all
that
the
is
time.
fun. And do you have a specific brand or type of? Do you like the big all-in-ones, like the ones that just scan, or ones that do just one function?
I generally sell multifunction devices, so that most of the time they'll print, copy, and scan. Faxing is kind of going the way of the dodo. There are some industries out there that still just will not give up their fax boards. But I sell different brands: Canon, Konica Minolta, Kyocera, Kip, and HP. So it's not, for me, it's not a one size fits all. I can literally ask the questions and right size somebody to the challenges that they're facing at their location that maybe another brand isn't going to solve as easily.
Is there new technology? And then some of the older ones for the scanner, you're able to put a USB in there. Is there any kind of wireless or Bluetooth where I don't need to have hardware anymore, that I can just say, scan this document, send it to a computer?
Well, you still have to walk up to the copier to make
Correct,
the
yeah.
scan.
If
But
I
yes,
scan,
there's Wi-Fi capabilities
nice.
that can be added to most brands now.
Okay.
Not all of them, but most of them. And a lot of it just depends on the size of the machine. Some of them are just meant for, small desktop applications or 1 or 2 person office applications, and they may not have all of those bells and whistles. Most of the time, console copiers, the big ones that, we all think of when you walk up to your copier, those are actually custom built. They don't come out of the box that way. So
Okay.
it's made to order.
Ray, do you have anything else you want to tell anybody?
If you guys are interested in learning more about your own situation, give me a call. I'll come in and do a free cost analysis and workflow analysis with you. Sit down and talk about challenges you're having and see if we can close the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you learned a lot of information, and we'll see you again.
Bye.
Just stop.